Welcome to day 4 of the Plant Power Challenge. This is Elisa, and I am here today as your cruise director on this plant-powered journey. So if you joined and got to catch the other sessions earlier in the week, fantastic. If not, you can always catch up. So even if this is your first time watching the Plant Power Challenge, you can still catch up. So send me an email, send me a DM. I will get you all the emails with the links, or you can catch the recordings in the group. But again, there's 2 ways to watch. So you might be here on Zoom with me, or you might be on Facebook, whichever is better for you. And you might, prefer to get the emails later in the day so you can watch them at, your own time schedule. And the really cool thing is if you get the workbook, then you've got some tools that you can use, not just for today, but, going forward. And they don't have to just apply to eating plant powered, but they really help as far as being aware, like having an awareness of what you're eating or why you're eating. Some things that, can trip us up. You might have emotional eating issues, which, a lot of us do. And it can go one way or the other, where maybe you eat a lot more when you're emotional, or maybe you eat a lot less, and starting to figure out those things or why you have certain trigger foods. And again, just having that awareness, keeping a food journal, maybe having a meal planner so you have a plan. So when you get stressed out or you've had a long day, you don't have to try and figure out, how am I going to eat a healthy meal? Especially if you do have a goal, maybe to lose that spare tire or to lower your cholesterol. So it really helps to have a plan, because without a plan, you're kind of wandering in the dark. So earlier in the week, we talked about, several different things. We talked about how to get protein from plants, which is a big thing, where a lot of people think you cannot get protein unless you have, an animal product, which is, 100% not true. Plants have tons of protein in them. So I shared a chart that you can look at, but you, of course, could always Google a chart and say, protein in plants, and you'll, see some really cool things. And I had mentioned that I was first introduced to that thought through a book by Dr. Joel Fuhrman called Eat to Live, which he, had a nice, it was just a verbal chart of, spinach and how much protein it has, and different other vegetables and beans and things like that, and how much protein they have. Because a lot of times, you might be led to believe that you can only get protein by eating, meat or steak or something like that. And so then the last 2 days, we looked at some different swaps. So how can you have some of your favorite foods, but maybe up level them nutrition wise? And we looked at, more like meat based or meal based swaps. And then yesterday I shared a whole lot of my favorites for dairy swaps, because that can be a tripping point for a lot of people. One other thing I wanted to mention, because today we're going to look at juices, smoothies, and shakes. But one of my favorite things is to add sprouts, or to make my own sprouts. So just a little side note on sprouts. Sprouts have, they're kind of like super nutrition, because they are, powerhouses of nutrition packed in those little sprouts, because they're like the beginning of the vegetable. So like a broccoli sprout has actually more nutrition than if you were to eat, some broccoli. Although, still eat the broccoli, it's fantastic for you. But when you eat sprouts, you really take your nutrition up a whole ton. And the cool thing is you can make sprouts at home. I have a couple of videos on my YouTube channel that show how to make sprouts, just how easy it is. Recently, I got a really cool little maker it's a container to make your sprouts, and it doesn't actually make the sprouts, but it helps you, as far as making it easier to rinse them and things. But really all you need is a jar and either some cheesecloth or maybe some plastic wrap that you poke holes in, and you put the sprouts in. So I don't want to get into all of it right now, but it's super easy to make them on your own. And if you buy sprouts at the grocery store, it's, a few bucks for a tiny little container. But if you were to buy the seeds themselves to make your own sprouts, you could spend the same amount of money on the seeds and get, I don't even know, tons and tons of your own, containers of sprouts. And plus then, that how fresh they are. And, because sometimes there are safety issues when it comes to sprouts, whether they're, I've heard different things as far as, that. So making your sprouts is an awesome way to go. And you can put them in things like what we're going to talk about today. You can put them in smoothies. You can put them in juices. I also love to put sprouts in salads and stir fries. You can put them on, a sandwich, all kinds of things. So you can get creative with those. So I mentioned today we're going to talk about juices, smoothies, and shakes. So there are lots of recipes out there for protein shakes, plant smoothies, even if you're going to juice. But what I really like to do is just get creative, see what I have in the refrigerator, see what I have in my house, maybe what's growing in my garden, especially something that needs to be used. So rather than letting something go to waste because I don't know what to do with it, or maybe I feel like I have too much, juicing is an awesome way to go. Juicing or making a smoothie or a protein shake. Now, when you do juice, you're going to find you use a lot more vegetables and fruits because it just takes up a lot more to make, a cup or, a couple cups for you and maybe somebody in your family. With both making juices and smoothies or shakes, I recommend, if you can, to get a better blender or a better juicer. But if you're just starting out, use what you have, or, maybe invest in something smaller if you're, trying it out. When I first started, I had kind of a combination juicer, blender type of thing. I think it was a Ninja. And now I have separate ones. So I have a pretty good juicer. I think it's a Breville. And then I have a Vitamix blender, which is one of the better blenders. So there's Vitamix and there's Blendtec. Those are two of the big ones. But the reason why I'm telling you to get a better blender or a better juicer is because it's going to affect the product. So I have a client who, when I would recommend, certain smoothies to her, she would tell me how much she hated them. But it was because the blender that she had was, kind of like a $10 or $15 blender, which might be great for, a lot of other things, but it really wasn't breaking up the kale and other things. So it was a kind of a texture issue for her. She didn't like the texture of the shake. So, that could be an issue for you. So if it is, then you definitely want to invest in maybe, a higher end blender or juicer. So, and one thing to keep in mind is juices and smoothies and shakes, they're all a little bit different. So the juices, I recommend that you definitely start first with some greens. So again, maybe whatever you have in your house, or go exploring in the grocery store. You can do spinach, you can do kale. You can get creative with some things we're going to talk about tomorrow, but I'll give you a little hint today. So you might put some dandelion greens in there or some other things like that. So you can start out with the greens. And I definitely recommend that you put the greens in there. That's a great way to get that, that green power, that chlorophyll going through your body. And then you can add things like maybe an apple. If you do juice an apple, make sure to take the seeds out. That's really important. You do not want to juice the seeds. But other things, depending upon what it is, and how, if you're using organic or non-organic, some things you can leave the peels on. Like maybe if you have an organic lemon, if you wanted to, you might want to leave the peel on, or you can take it off. But you just start playing around with it. So you have the greens, maybe an apple, maybe a little bit of lemon or lime. You could do some other citrus, maybe some orange. Another thing to do is to add a little bit of ginger. So you could add what I often hear as a thumb size piece of ginger, or just a little bit of that, and just try it out, see what you get. Now, again, there are tons of recipes, and I've got some that I can share with you as well. But truthfully, I just play with being creative with what I have on hand. When it comes to making a smoothie, then I like to do things like frozen banana, frozen fruit. Now, as an Ayurvedic coach, I will tell you a lot of times I stay away from the colder smoothies, and you can actually make kind of like a room temperature smoothie, which is better for your digestion, because when we drink cold things or eat any type of cold things, a lot of times it can dampen our digestion. So you might want to pay attention to that. See if you notice any digestive issues if you're drinking a lot of cold smoothies. But again, with the smoothies, I do the same thing. I get creative. I might use some brewed tea. If I have some herbal tea in the house, or some green tea, that might go in my smoothie. You can put nut butter in your smoothie. Another favorite for me is using a green powder. Again, this I make kind of from things in my own yard, and we'll talk about some of that tomorrow. I also enjoy red beet powder in my smoothie. So like I call it a smoothie, but it's really definitely more of a, of a protein shake. And then if you'd like, if you haven't added tea or something like that, you can add some water or some plant milk, some other extras that I put in just to up the nutrition because, if it doesn't already have enough. And I almost forgot to mention, I do put greens in my smoothie as well. So I'll have greens in my juice, greens in my smoothie, and it could be that spinach, it could be kale, it could be romaine lettuce, it could be whatever I have. But I'll put it in. And I'm a big fan of the kale and the spinach for sure. But other things that I use are chia seeds, hemp seeds, or flax seeds. So we talked about that earlier in the week, I think. And those are three things that I use. I'll put those in oatmeal. I do a little combination of those. I have kind of a shaker bottle that I keep in my fridge with those, but I like to put those in my smoothies as well. So you can see it's really about getting creative. You can follow recipes. I do have a really cool recipe book from Amadea Morningstar where she has all different kinds of drinks and, based on the season. So I mentioned you have to be careful with cold drinks. So I especially won't drink the smoothies in winter because I'm already cold in the winter. You might be cold too, or maybe you're somebody who's warmer and hotter and enjoy the cold. But when it's winter time, that's a time that you especially want something warm. So I wouldn't drink personally a smoothie during the winter just because that's really going to take my digestion out of whack because the cold is just going to throw my digestion out of alignment. And it's just, I'm just not going to have the digestive fire that I need. So that's kind of food for thought if you're trying to maintain your smoothie habit over the winter. But now that we're coming into warmer weather, I tend to drink more closer to room temperature smoothies. So we talked about your equipment, whether it's a blender or a juicer. And when it comes to juice, fresh is always better. So I know a lot of people might like orange juice or apple juice, and you might like one or both of those. But if you can make it fresh, it's so much better because when it's on the shelf, different things, it's just not as nutrient dense for your body. So that's a really important thing. And one thing I wanted to share with you too, like the difference between juicing and smoothies. Now, anything that you put in a blender, it goes in, it comes out. It's all, you get all the fiber. So that's one thing. And, where some people may have an issue with juicing because you don't get the fiber. But what happens is like, it's almost like it's super dosing your system. Like, I don't know if you've ever made fresh juice, but sometimes when I take a sip of it, like I can feel it rushing into my bloodstream. Now, what happens is when you make the juice, though, you end up with a bunch of pulp. So there are a couple things, maybe even more than a couple things that you can do with the pulp after it's done, because you end up having to clean this up. So I'll often use the pulp to make my own broth. So that could be one thing that you can use. You can also compost it. So if you're somebody who composts or you have a garden, it's a good way to start composting because you've got all this valuable fiber that came out of it. So you can still use it for different things. But again, what we'll often do is first use it for broth, and then the broth gets skimmed. You use like cheesecloth to get it out of the broth, and then it might go into the compost. So it gets a lot of bang for your buck. What else can I tell you? I mentioned always removing the seeds from apples, and those are, I think, my big tips for juicing and smoothies. If I've missed something or if you have a question, please make sure to comment below. Because again, there is a drawing. I'm holding a drawing at the end of this challenge because we're coming up. We just have one more day. But at the end of the challenge, everybody who comments on a video before 9 p.m. or if they send me an email, so you can send me an email or you can comment below, maybe a tip that, you learned something new you want to try, or maybe there you have a suggestion. Maybe there's a juice or a smoothie or something that, you do a little differently that you wanted to share. Maybe there's a wonder food you put in yours. And actually, I'm sure I'm leaving something else. If I think of something, I can add that in the email that I'll be sending out later today. But those are my tips. It's really about getting creative and using, what you have. So it doesn't always mean having to go out and buy something new. I mean, you might want to up level your blender or your juicer, if you do it a lot and you notice, hey, I'd like a smoother texture, because from what I found, from making the changes of blenders and juicers over time for myself, I have noticed a big difference. So that's what I've got for you today. It is a beautiful Thursday. I'm hoping you're enjoying yours. And again, if you like what you've been hearing and you want to learn more about how you can work with me, ways that I can help you, start to live the thriving, healthy, beautiful life that you want, maybe up level your habits. That's what I am here for. So send me a message, and until then, I will see you tomorrow for our day 5 of the Plant Power Challenge. Thanks so much and have a wonderful day. Namaste.